My mother told me writing was wasting my life. After 3 years and 47 rejections, they finally published my novel. But when I told her, she confessed she had never read anything I wrote and didn't understand why I kept trying something I had no talent for. I'm 26 years old. I'm a writer. I mean, well, I work in advertising, but I've always considered myself a real writer. And what happened a few weeks ago with my mom basically destroyed me in a way I wasn't expecting. Although, if I'm being honest, I should have seen it coming, because she's been telling me for years that writing is a waste of time. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was like 19 and I started writing my first real novel, not that stuff I wrote in high school that was basically bad fan fiction. I studied literature in college, graduated at 22, and since then, I've been working at this advertising agency that pays well, but is literally killing my soul. You know? Writing slogans for products nobody cares about. While my real passion is in that manuscript I've been polishing and sending to publishers for 3 years. My dad, David, always supported me with the writing thing, like he was the only one who really believed in me and told me that someday he was going to see my book in bookstores, and that he was going to be proud to tell everyone I was his daughter. My mom, Linda, is the complete opposite. You know what I mean? She's like 48 years old, she's a managing director of some big company, grew up super poor and worked her way up through hard work. So for her, anything that isn't financial stability and a real job is basically throwing your life away. Every time I mentioned my novel, she would roll her eyes or change the subject. And if I insisted, she would say things like, writing isn't a real career, that I need to be practical, and that I should look at all my college classmates who already have important positions while I'm still dreaming about something that's never going to happen. The thing is, I kept writing anyway because my dad encouraged me, and we had this plan that when I finally published my book, we were going to celebrate big, you know, go to that fancy restaurant we always said we were going to try. But 2 years ago, my dad died. From a super sudden heart attack, like he was fine one day and the next he wasn't. And honestly, it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Because I didn't just lose my dad, but I lost the only ally I had in this family. After that, dinners with my mom became even more tense. We continued with that tradition of having dinner together every Wednesday at her house, because she insists it's important to keep the family together, but it was basically me sitting there listening to her criticize every aspect of my life for 2 hours while we ate chicken or whatever she had cooked. During those 2 years, I kept sending my manuscript to publishers, one after another, and I got nothing but rejections or they just didn't respond. Which is almost worse because at least a rejection gives you some closure, you know? My mom knew I was still trying because sometimes letters would arrive at her house. Since when I sent the first versions, I still lived with her and I put that address. And a time an envelope arrived, she would give it to me, with that, "I told you so." Look, that made me want to scream. It got to a point where I was so desperate and tired that I decided if this last version didn't work, I was going to throw everything away and dedicate myself only to advertising. Forget about this dream that clearly wasn't meant to happen. So, like a month and a half ago, I sent the final version of my novel to this mid-sized publisher I'd been looking at, one that published exactly the kind of literary fiction I write. And honestly, I didn't have much hope, but I did it anyway because what did it matter anymore, right? And then I tried not to think about it, kept going to work, writing my stupid cereal ads or whatever, having dinner with my mom on Wednesdays and listening to her sermons about how I should be looking for a promotion or thinking about getting an MBA instead of wasting my time with hobbies that aren't going anywhere. One day I got home from work, and there was an envelope in my mailbox. One of those big brown envelopes that are clearly from a company, and when I saw the return address was from the publisher, my heart literally stopped, because it had been like 2 months since I sent the manuscript, and I'd already assumed it was another silent rejection. But when I grabbed it, I realized it weighed more than normal. It wasn't just a standard rejection letter, and my hands were shaking so much I could barely open it. I opened it, standing there in the hallway of my building, like I didn't even wait to go up to my apartment. And when I read the first lines that said, "We are pleased to inform you that we have decided to publish your novel," I almost fell to the floor. I literally had to lean against the wall because my legs weren't responding. I stood there reading the letter over and over and over because I couldn't believe it was real. After 3 years of rejections and feeling like I was a failure chasing something impossible, someone had finally said yes, that my work was worthwhile, that it was going to be a real book that people could buy and read. I cried right there in the hallway. I didn't care if any neighbor saw me. And the first thing I thought about was my dad and how happy and proud he would have been. And that made me cry even more, because he wasn't going to be there to see it, but at the same time, I felt like somehow he knew. You know what I mean? I called a couple of friends and we went out to celebrate that night. We got drunk, and I screamed in the bar that I was going to be a published author, and everyone hugged me and congratulated me, and it was amazing. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about my mom and how she was going to react when I told her. Part of me was super excited to finally be able to prove to her that she was wrong, that I wasn't wasting my time, that this was real, and it was going to happen. I decided I was going to wait until Wednesday dinner to tell her in person. I wanted to see her face when I gave her the news. I wanted that moment of vindication after years of her telling me it was never going to work. Wednesday, I arrived at her house as usual. It was one of those normal March afternoons. I think, or maybe April. I'm not sure. But it was cold, and it was already getting dark when I rang the doorbell. My mom opened the door with her usual tired from work face, greeted me with a super automatic kiss on the cheek, and told me dinner would be ready in 10 minutes. I was practically jumping with excitement inside, but I tried to stay calm. I went to the living room and sat on the couch while she finished cooking, and then I saw it. The letter from the publisher was there on the coffee table, unopened. At first, I didn't understand what it was doing there, because I had received my copy at my building, but then I remembered I had put my mom's address as an alternative address, because sometimes the mail at my building is a disaster, and things get lost. My mom came out of the kitchen drying her hands with a towel, and when she saw I was looking at the letter, she said, "Oh yeah, that arrived for you like a week ago." I assumed it was another rejection, so I didn't even bother telling you. You can take it with you when you leave if you want. And the way she said it, like so casual and so full of that I told you so attitude, made me feel a fury I hadn't felt in a long time. We sat down to dinner, and she started with her normal routine, asking me about work, and when I said everything was fine, but that I had exciting news, she interrupted me to tell me she also had something to tell me. She told me she had been thinking a lot about my future, and that she thought it was time for me to make more mature decisions. But that I was already 26 years old, and I couldn't keep living in that tiny apartment working in advertising while wasting my time with writing that clearly wasn't going anywhere. I said, "Mom, let me talk. I have something important to tell you." But she continued. She said that if I received another rejection from a publisher, that should be a clear sign that I needed to leave that dream behind and focus on my real career. Then she said something that left me frozen. She said that if I quit my advertising job to dedicate myself to writing full-time, like I had mentioned I wanted to do someday, she was going to stop talking to me and supporting me financially in any way, that she wasn't going to be complicit in me ruining my life. And that killed me because I hadn't even told her I was going to quit. She was just assuming the worst of me like always, assuming I was going to make the most irresponsible decision possible, because in her head I'm this idiotic dreamer who doesn't understand how the real world works. I exploded. I literally got up from the table and yelled at her that if she ever bothered to open her letters before judging me, she would see that that letter on the coffee table isn't a rejection. It's an acceptance. That a publisher is going to publish my novel, and that finally, after 3 years of work, someone besides Dad believes in me. My mom's face completely changed, like it went from that superior and condescending expression to something like shock or confusion, and she got up and went to grab the letter, but I got there first. I grabbed it and opened it myself right there in front of her and started reading out loud the parts where they said they loved my work and that they wanted to publish it and that they believed it had commercial potential. My mom stood there, not saying anything for a moment, and then tried to recover. She said, "Congratulations, honey. That's wonderful. I'm sorry, I assumed wrong." But I was so angry I couldn't even look at her. I told her that for years, she had been telling me it was a waste of time, that it was never going to work, that I needed to be realistic, and that not even when the most important letter of my life arrived did she bother to open it or ask me about it, because she had already decided it was a failure. I told her that Dad would have been so proud of me and that he did believe in me unlike her. And as soon as I said that, I realized I had gone too far because I saw how her eyes filled with tears. She tried to talk, tried to say that she's always wanted the best for me and that she was just trying to protect me from disappointment. But I didn't want to hear anything anymore. I grabbed my things and left her house, leaving her standing there in the dining room with dinner half eaten. I drove back to my apartment crying so hard I almost crashed twice. And when I got there, I locked myself in and cried for hours because I had waited so long for that moment of finally being able to tell her, "Look, I did it. You were wrong, and instead it turned into another horrible fight where it became clearer than ever that she's never going to really support me. The next few days were weird. My mom sent me like 20 messages apologizing and saying she was happy for me and that she had reacted badly. That please, let's talk. But I didn't respond because I was too angry and hurt. My friends told me I should talk to her, that she was my mom, and that she clearly felt bad. But I kept thinking about all those times she made me feel like a failure. All those dinners where she criticized me. All those times she compared my life to others and made me feel inadequate. The publisher sent me the contract and all the information about the publishing process, tentative dates and all that. And every time something exciting happened related to the book, my first instinct was to call my dad, and then I'd remember he wasn't there. And my second instinct was to tell my mom. But then I'd remember she would probably find something negative to say about it. Like 2 weeks passed and I started to feel really lonely. Like it's weird to be living the most exciting moment of your life and not being able to share it with your family. Well, with the only family you have left. I thought a lot about what my friends had told me about giving her a chance, about how maybe she was just trying to protect me in her way even though she did it super badly. And finally, I sent her a message saying we could meet and talk. She responded immediately, saying, yes, whenever I wanted, that she would go wherever I said. So we agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my house on a Saturday afternoon. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a table in the back. She looked nervous and tired, and when she saw me come in, she stood up like she didn't know if she should hug me or stay seated. We sat down and there was an awkward silence until she started apologizing. She said she had been horrible to me, that she shouldn't have assumed anything about the letter, that she was genuinely happy I had managed to publish my book. She sounded sincere and I wanted to believe her. The truth is, I wanted so badly for this to be the moment where we finally fixed things and she became the supportive mom I'd always wanted. But then I asked her directly. I said, Mom, do you really think I'm a good writer? Do you think my book is worthwhile? And there was a super long pause. Too long. And I already knew what was coming, but I still needed to hear it. She sighed and said, honestly, honey, no, I don't think you're a good writer. I've read some things you wrote, and I don't understand them. They seem confusing and slow to me, and I don't see what people would find interesting about them. She said that's why she had never supported me in this. Because she didn't want me to put all my eggs in a basket she didn't think was going to work. And that, yes, clearly she had been wrong because a publisher did want to publish me, but that she still didn't understand my work. I sat there processing what she had just said, and I felt like something inside me broke definitively. Because it's one thing for your mom to be practical and tell you that you need a plan B, but it's a completely different thing for her to tell you to your face that she doesn't think you have talent, that she doesn't understand your work, that basically everything you've been doing for 7 years doesn't make sense to her. I started crying right there in the coffee shop. Not normal crying, but something hysterical where I couldn't breathe well and people were looking at us. And my mom tried to grab my hand, but I got up and ran out. I literally ran out of the coffee shop and walked down the street crying like crazy until I got to my apartment. That night was one of the worst of my life. Worse even than when my dad died, because at least then I knew he had loved me and believed in me. But now I had to deal with the fact that my mom, the only family I had left, had never believed in me and probably never would. I called my best friend and told her everything, between sobs, and she came over and stayed with me that night because honestly, I didn't want to be alone. I was scared of what I might do or think if I stayed alone with those thoughts. The next few days were a blur. I kept going to work but like in automatic mode. And every time I thought about my mom, I felt like crying again. She kept sending me messages, but I didn't know what to say to her. Like, what are you supposed to say to someone who basically told you you're not good at the only thing you love to do? I talked to my editor about publication dates and all that it would be in like 6 months, and he asked me if I wanted to invite my family to the book launch, and I just said I didn't really have family, which was super depressing to admit out loud. At like a week after that disaster at the coffee shop, I sent my mom a message telling her I needed to tell her something. And we had a super awkward phone call where I told her I had quit my job at the advertising agency because with the advance from the publisher and my savings, I could afford to take a year to focus on writing my second novel and on the publication process of the first one. I expected her to explode or tell me I was irresponsible, but instead she just said, okay, if that's what you want to do, I hope it goes well for you, and hung up. That call left me feeling even emptier because we didn't even have a real fight, just this cold and distant conversation like we were strangers. 2 days later, it was a Thursday afternoon. Someone knocked on my apartment door, and when I opened it, it was my mom. She looked horrible. like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red and swollen, and as soon as she saw me, she started crying right there in the hallway. She came in and sat on my couch and cried for like 10 minutes without saying anything while I was just standing there not knowing what to do, because I had never seen my mom like this. She was always so strong and controlled, and now she was completely broken. Finally, she managed to speak and told me she was so sorry, that she had been thinking nonstop about everything she had said and done over the years, and that she realized she had been a terrible mother in that regard, that she had let her own fear and her own insecurities turn her into someone who was constantly putting down her own daughter. She told me that the reason she had never supported me wasn't because she didn't believe in me, but because she was so afraid of seeing me fail and suffer that she preferred to convince me not to try, and that she realized now how toxic and harmful that had been. She said she didn't understand my writing because she wasn't a creative person, that her brain worked in numbers and logic and business strategies, but that didn't mean my work wasn't valuable. It just meant she wasn't the right audience. She talked to me about her own mom, my grandmother who died when I was little, and about how she had been just as critical and harsh with my mom when she was young, always telling her she wasn't enough, that she needed to try harder, that the world was cruel, and I needed to be stronger. She told me she had sworn never to be like that with her own daughter, but in the end she had repeated exactly the same patterns because it was all she knew. And that when my dad died and she was left alone with that responsibility, she got even worse because she was terrified of failing me without him there to balance her. We cried together for hours, and I told her she had hurt me so much for so long that I didn't know if we could fix this, that I didn't know if I could trust her to really support me. She said she understood completely, but that she wanted to try, that she wanted to go to therapy, that she wanted us to go to therapy together if I was willing, that she would do whatever was necessary to build a better relationship with me because she didn't want to lose me, that she had already lost my dad and the idea of losing me too was killing her. We were talking until super late. I think it was like 2 in the morning when she finally left, and we agreed that yes, we were going to try therapy together, that we were going to work on this, but that it would take time and that I needed her to really make the effort, not just words but real actions. She promised me she would. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like a little bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could have a healthy mother-daughter relationship eventually. Now, a few weeks have passed since that conversation, and we started going to therapy together. We go once a week, and it's been intense. But good, I guess? Like we're starting to untangle years and years of toxic patterns and horrible communication. My mom is really trying. She asks me about my book and about the publication. And even though I know she probably doesn't understand anything, I tell her at least she's listening and she's trying to show genuine interest. I'm still angry and hurt, and I'll probably be that way for a long time. But I also want to have a mom in my life. You know, especially now that my dad isn't here. My book is being published in November, and I told my mom that if she wants, she can come to the launch, that I'd like her to be there even if just that. She started crying when I told her, and said nothing would make her happier, so I guess we'll see what happens. I don't know if we'll ever have the perfect relationship I always wanted. Probably not. But maybe we can have something better than what we had. Something more honest and real, even if it's complicated and difficult. And as for my writing career, I'm finally doing this full time, like I always dreamed. And even though it's scary, and I don't know if I'll be able to sustain myself like this forever, for now I feel happier and more myself than I've felt in years. And I guess that's enough for now.